Hi, I'm Sarah Lacy. Welcome to TechCrunch TV. My guest today is David Pakman of Venrock, and we are going to talk about why Jeff Bewkes is his favorite person in the New York tech landscape, right?
Oh yes, very much so.
Now, there was news this week that Mr. Bewkes was saying that Netflix was a fading star, and as soon as these contracts come back up for renewal, the studios are just going to stick it to Netflix. They're not going to be able to continue the streaming revolution. Go through your list of all the reasons you think he's an idiot.
Yeah, well, he's clearly not an idiot. I mean, they've done great things with HBO and a number of important properties. They make good movies. But this point of view, this sort of anti-new distribution platform point of view, is very typical of content owners. We saw this with the music industry. They were seeing CD sales decline, lamenting piracy, and along comes Apple and launches this incredibly simple, wonderful experience for buying downloads. Sales take off, and what's the first thing the music industry does? They complain. This is terrible. Apple's not charging enough money for the music. They're underselling our price point, even though we agreed to let them sell it at this price. We need to raise prices. Apple's going to destroy the industry. Meanwhile, Apple's not destroying the industry. It's just helping it along and providing an important revenue stream. Apple went from nothing to become the world's largest retailer of music in just a few years. Now, here we go again with digital video. Netflix tried to get deals with the studios for many years for DVDs. The studios said, no way, you're going to charge too little for consumers. They need to pay a whole lot more to watch movies than some monthly subscription fee of $7 or $10. Netflix said, fine, we'll just rent DVDs. We can buy them at wholesale. We can buy them from Walmart. You can't stop us from doing that. They did that. They delighted consumers. They built a business of 15 million subscribers. They're almost as large as the largest cable company. They now turn around, strike deals with the studios. They pay them $1 billion to get a whole bunch of video rights, and the consumers love it. 60% of their customers start streaming within a year, an incredible transformation from physical to digital media distribution. And what does Jeff Bewkes say? This is terrible. They're underselling our content. We're going to raise prices on Netflix. And we can talk about why I think he's really wrong.
Well, it's so interesting because I've been having a similar conversation all over the valley about Spotify, and everyone's saying, "Oh no, any minute now they're going to announce these great licensing deals, with content that will allow them to have this free streaming, whatever you want to hear service in the U.S." And everyone can articulate the reason labels should do that, and the reason they should do it with a service like Spotify, and the reason they need a hedge off of Apple, and the reason consumers want it, and that's the direction we're. But that assumes these people are logical, and they've never been logical. Now, a lot of people thought when it came to movies and television, there was more rationality. There was a lot of talk of, coming out of Sony, coming out of these big groups of, we learned from the mistakes of the music industry, we don't want to do that again. Has the movie industry really learned from the mistakes of the movie industry? I mean, they're not suing customers, so they have some cred, right?
Yeah. Boy, Sarah, you've articulated one of the many reasons why we tend not to invest in digital media startups that require licenses from rights holders, because they tend to act irrationally. They don't act in their own economic self-interest. They instead act with sort of protectionist policies. Yes, we'll go into the new market as long as we price it in a way so that it won't cannibalize the old market. We see DVD sales beginning a steep decline. And my point about why Bewkes needs to be nice to Reed Hastings is that by the time his deal comes up for renewal, I think Netflix might have 25 or 30 million subscribers. They're going to be larger than any cable company. They're going to be the largest streamer of Jeff Bewkes' content, and Jeff Bewkes is going to want to be working with them. And this idea that he's going to turn around and say, now I'm going to double or triple my prices and make you raise prices, I think Netflix will have the leverage, much in the same way that Apple has leverage over the labels. But that's not just a bad thing. The content owners consider that to be really bad when a giant emerges. I consider that to be a success. You need services that are delighting consumers, for which consumers are paying for content so that they're not stealing it. And Netflix has proven to help, I think, ward off a lot of piracy, because it's easier to stream from Netflix than it is to use one of the crazy torrent sites and download and
get spyware and everything else. I mean,
I'm just saying he needs a lot of them. He needs more than one. He can't just have Netflix. He needs to enable other services to be as successful. But the problem is they've priced their content with Apple and Amazon and Microsoft with these crazy sort of a la carte $3 or $4 or $5 24-hour rental. The movie expires 24 hours after you start it. Hope you don't have kids and fall asleep in the middle of watching your movie because you won't be able to watch it the next day. I mean, these sort of customer unfriendly policies that are letting Netflix be really big and successful.
And I gotta say, I think the iPad just plays into that. I'm so irritated with Apple's content rules and the fact that I have to buy everything natively just for that iPad. And, you know, I've been living as a digital citizen for quite a while now, and I have a big amassed content library. And the fact that because I didn't buy it on iTunes right then, I can't watch it on my iPad is so anti-consumer. And we talk about Apple being part of the solution with music. I think they're part of the problem when it comes to video. And I think that, you know, what makes the iPad great for me, to me, the killer app is the long battery life and being able to stream Netflix.
Right, totally. You know, I think a theme of our investing is to invest in services that delight the consumer, that really.
But why is that so hard for Hollywood? I mean, well, that seems to be the whole thing. Because, like, I was at a dinner last night with a sort of well-known Hollywood insider that I'm not allowed to talk about. But you know, he was going on and on about how, you know, how stupid the industry was for allowing Netflix to be born, but the industry couldn't have created Netflix. And you know, further to that point, someone brought up, when are we going to get sort of day and date, same, you know, release of movies on every medium? And he was like, well, it's never going to happen because there's all these deals with cable and deals with the multiplexes. Like, from the consumer point of view, that's kind of their problem. That's not my problem. I mean, it just seems Hollywood is still so anti-consumer. Even Hulu, which gets more credit than some.
I think you're right. It's very hard. The content rights holders in entertainment do not think about how could we enable the most number of services to delight consumers. That's not their sort of beginning point of view when they set about licensing. They say, how can we develop these complex licensing strategies that protect all these economics and all these different channels? And you know, if the consumer doesn't like them so much, that's the cable company's problem, or that's the digital streaming company's problem. Our content is great. That's a short-sighted view. In a view where we have infinite choice of entertainment, which we now have, right? Between ringtones and iPhone games and
TechCrunch TV.
Yeah, and TechCrunch TV, which we spend hours a day watching. We have too many choices on video or entertainment. So what you want to do as a content owner is make sure you lower the friction to getting people to find and watch your stuff. And if all of these licensing barriers and usage rule barriers stand in the way of you doing it, the alternative is piracy. Netflix, the reason they exist is because the blockbuster pricing policies were inconvenient and a problem for people. Late fees suck. So Reed said, how about if we made a service with no late fees? Now the same with streaming. He said, all these arcane usage rules, one device, 24 hours, $4.99 a movie. He said, that sucks. We need $8, $10, all you can eat, and customers love it. And that's a good thing for the industry, not a bad thing.
Last note, what about Comcast and Netflix? I mean, it's, you know, they're not only fighting this warfare on the studio side, but now Comcast is saying they're gobbling up 20% of the primetime broadband, which, as far as I can tell, no one actually knows if that's even true or not, and they need to be paying more. Is that a bigger headache for Hastings at this point?
So I think, a bit of a bold prediction, but I think some of the larger cable MSOs in this country will end up partnering with Netflix and letting Netflix be their VOD channel because they're so good at it. And that enables them to participate in the economics of Netflix as opposed to just look at them as this cost structure that's sucking all this bandwidth costs of their consumers. So I think that this streaming phenomenon might force partnerships. I don't know if Comcast does that, but I do think some of the others might do that. And at that point, that's why I say that Comcast can easily go from 15 or 16 million users to 30 with a couple of those deals.
Well, it sounds like you're counting on those cable operators to be rational. Are they more rational than the content owners?
In some ways they are, because they actually get paid by the consumers, but they haven't had as much competition over the years, right, as we wish they had, which is kind of what's made them behave so improperly in our eyes. But now there's competition. Right now we can just choose to pay Netflix, and over time, you know, this cord-cutting phenomenon, I do think, has some legs to it. It's not going to replace cable, but we do have choices about other places we can pay for legitimate content, and that puts pressure on them. I think some of these Comcast innovations, if you will, the new set-top boxes they're talking about and the iPad channel changers, these are good things. You never would have seen this stuff from them 5 years ago. You did a post earlier talking about what was so unique about Netflix and why they had pulled this off when so few startups have actually managed to build a viable company in this, you know, kind of digital living room thing we've all been hearing about for decades.
is anyone else out there on the horizon that you see following their playbook, doing some of the things they did right, or is it just Netflix and we got to deal with the rest of them?
It's really hard. Netflix exploited this really cool opportunity in copyright law that said if the studios didn't want to play ball with them, and they didn't, that Netflix could still launch their DVD business, as I said, by buying a bunch of wholesale DVDs. And that's exactly what they did, which forced the hand of the studios to start to license them or actually sell them DVDs at reduced rates or do revenue sharing. But very few, music has no such loophole, neither does ebooks. So many of the other media types don't allow a startup to get in business unless they can get licenses from content holders. And the problem as an investor, as a VC, we look at these companies and we know that the licensing terms are often uneconomical and could never allow startups to succeed. So we don't invest in them, right? I mean, this is one of the big problems for the entertainment industry is people like me don't want to invest in any startups that require licenses because they know they'll get non-economic ones and the company will fail. So instead, we'd rather invest in companies where there are no gatekeepers and that are creating alternate forms of entertainment that become competitive with the entertainment industry. This is a problem for the industry.
Well, you know, this weekend when I'm kicked back watching Battlestar Galactica streaming over Netflix, I will thank God for loopholes. Thank you so much for joining us, David.
Sarah, great to be here.